Imagine stepping into a world where the air is thick with the stench of dung, where the floors are coated with decades of filth, and where every room is a breeding ground for vermin. This is not a scene from a horror movie. It's a glimpse into the daily life of a medieval peasant in Europe. Welcome to a time when luxury was a rare privilege, and survival was a constant struggle. In the grand castles of the nobility, floors were tiled and walls were adorned with tapestries. Glass windows protected the inhabitants from the cold and rain, and the central hall, once a bustling and often drafty space, had given way to a more intimate living room with a massive hearth. Beyond this, a drawing room offered a place for private conversations, and a parlor served as a communal space for meals and general discussions. These were the halls of the mighty, where gluttony reigned supreme. A nobleman's dinner could consist of 15 to 20 dishes, and the Earl of Warwick, a prominent figure, would feed as many as 500 guests in a single sitting. For his evening meal, 6 oxen were consumed, often served salted and boiled, a tradition dating back to the need to prepare for sieges. On special occasions, a whole stag might be roasted, larded and served with a steaming pepper sauce, all on outsized plates. But for the majority of the population, life was far from this opulent setting. The home of a prosperous peasant was a rambling structure of thatch, wattles, mud, and dirty brown wood, often hidden behind a towering dung heap that dominated what would have been the front yard. The building was large because it served multiple purposes. Under its sagging roof, there was a pig pen, a hen house, cattle sheds, corn cribs, and straw and hay storage, with the family's living space being just a small part of the structure. The walls and timbers of this single room were coated with soot, and the floor was made of clay and rushes from the marshes, rarely replaced and often harboring years of filth. Erasmus, a keen observer of the time, noted that the floors were a breeding ground for disease, with spittle, vomit, and even the remains of animals and humans contributing to the unsanitary conditions. The centerpiece of this room was a gigantic bedstead, piled high with straw pallets, teeming with vermin. Everyone in the family, regardless of age or gender, shared this bed, including the livestock. Intimacy was a public affair, and if a stranger was staying the night, they were invited to join the family on the bed as a sign of hospitality. If a husband was away on a pilgrimage and his wife became pregnant, she could blame an incubus, a demonic being said to impregnate women in their sleep. This explanation was accepted by many, as theologians confirmed the existence of such creatures, and even used them to explain boys' wet dreams. While this might seem absurd today in medieval times, it was a convenient way to avoid direct accusations of infidelity, which could lead to ridicule and social ostracism. For the less fortunate peasants, life was even harsher. Many lived in tiny cabins of crossed laths, stuffed with grass or straw, offering minimal protection from the elements. These homes lacked chimneys, and smoke from the fire escaped through a small hole in the thatched roof, often causing fires. Glass windows and shutters were luxuries they could not afford, and in bad weather, they had to stuff the openings with whatever materials were available. Sleep was a bare necessity, with thin straw pallets and ragged blankets, if they were lucky. Some families had no blankets at all, and some didn't even have pallets, sleeping directly on the cold, hard ground. Famine was a constant threat, and 3 good years of harvest were often followed by a year of severe hunger. During these times, peasants might sell everything they owned, including their clothes, and be reduced to nudity in all seasons. They resorted to eating bark, roots, and even white clay to survive. In the most desperate moments, cannibalism was not unheard of. Strangers and travelers were sometimes waylaid and killed for their flesh, and there are accounts of gallows being torn down so that the bodies could be eaten raw. These were the darkest moments of medieval life, where survival was the only goal. However, in the good years, the peasants enjoyed their meals. 2 meals a day, dinner at 10 a.m. and supper at 5 p.m. were the norm, and bountiful harvests meant tables groaning under the weight of food. Meat was a rare luxury, but there were always huge pork sausages, endless rolls of black bread, and a variety of soups. Cabbage, watercress, and cheese soups were common, as were soups made from dried peas and bacon, and during Lent, fish soup was a staple. Every meal was accompanied by flagons of wine in Italy and France, and ale or beer in Germany and England. The per capita consumption of beer was staggering, with a gallon a day being the norm, even for children and nuns. Life in medieval Europe was a stark contrast between the opulence of the nobility and the squalor of the peasantry. While the wealthy dined on sumptuous feasts and lived in relative comfort, the majority struggled to survive in conditions that are hard to imagine today. This was a world where luxury was a rare privilege, and survival was a daily battle. But through it all, the resilience of the human spirit shone through, as people found ways to endure and even thrive in the face of overwhelming hardship.